Okay, let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Village of Martins Editions Candidate Forum. Via the Election Committee, I'm George McAleese.
Allison Price.
Ben Dunford.
Eric Shaw.
We're so appreciative to everyone for joining us. First things first, just a bit of housekeeping. We're going to ask everyone who is not the candidates, please remember to mute your to go on mute. If you are having an issue, feel free to type it into the chat box that's visible by the administrator, so we'll be able to see and identify if an issue is cropping up. So please use that, but we're going to ask everyone in the interest of being respectful of the candidates and everyone's time, please just make sure you're staying on mute during the meeting. We're so appreciative for our three candidates for being here tonight. We're incredibly appreciative for everyone in the village who's submitted questions over the past week and change. I think we've got an excellent set of questions that were submitted, covering a wide range of issues, and we're really looking forward to the candidates, hearing all the candidates' responses tonight. So the format that is going to be followed is candidates are each going to have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then we're going to move into the forum section where we have questions for the candidates on a range of areas. Those are each going to be 90 seconds with some opportunities at the committee's discretion for allowing some additional time for rebuttal if that is appropriate. And then the candidates will conclude with a closing statement. Because we had such a good set of questions that were submitted in advance, we are largely going to be working off of those questions that were submitted in advance. We feel that that is the fairest approach. We feel it's the approach that is most respectful of the people who submitted their questions in advance, and also being fair to people who may not have the opportunity or the circumstances that lend themselves to speaking up during a live forum. So, however, one thing that is available is the chat function. It's not an open chat for reasons that have been covered during a lot of council meetings over the past year and change, but that is visible by the administrators. If you have a question that you would you're interested in adding as a potential question for the forum, please type it in the chat. The administrators will be reviewing them as they come in, and as appropriate, if it is something that makes sense, if it is for within the flow of conversation, or is touching on an area that is not otherwise covered, it may be added to our list of questions for the candidates. Having said all of that, again, just a thank you to everyone for being here. We're going to ask again that everyone please stay on mute throughout the meeting. And with that, I think we are ready to get started. So we will start with opening statements, and up first is Katie Howard.
Good evening, residents. I'm Katie Filipchek Howard, and I reside at 3510 Taylor Street with my husband, Steve, daughters Hannah and Heidi, and our cat Mittens. I have the privilege of both growing up in the VMA and returning to live in my childhood home with my own children. My parents, Ben and Jill Filipchek, discovered this neighborhood. Sorry? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My parents, Ben and Jill Filipchek, discovered this neighborhood while taking a Sunday drive on a perfect fall day down Brookville Road. They were en route to East West Highway, where they lived in Silver Spring at the time. It was the same day they were taking their newborn home from Sibley Hospital, that would be me, and they decided then and there they would do whatever they could to save up and move to this idyllic stretch of Chevy Chase. My mother worked full-time and my father worked 2 jobs to make it happen. We moved here in 1980, just weeks before I turned 5 years old, and my grandmother Eileen soon joined our bungalow and multi-generational household to help care for one another. Fast forward, and my parents and grandmother might not recognize the neighborhood today. However, my guiding light as your elected representative continues to be my mother, who also served on the VMA Council. It truly takes a village to function as the Village of Martins Edition, which is why I share my heartfelt thanks to our hardworking village staff and to all of the residents who serve or previously served on village committees. Thank you also to my fellow council colleagues. I am further appreciative of the members of the election committee who made this event possible, and I'm looking forward to resident questions this evening. It's an opportunity to express why I seek re-election expand upon my proud voting record, and why I continue on 3 platforms: resident relations, community communications, and public safety. If any residents find they have additional questions or suggestions after the forum, I invite you to another opportunity to hear from us at a Coffee with the Candidates event at my home this Saturday from 9 to 11, paid for by the candidates. I wish Andrew and Joel the best of luck, whatever the outcome of this election, as I don't view myself as running against either one of them, but running for myself rather, to keep my hard-earned seat at the VMA table, and I will fight to maintain it.
Thank you, Katie. Next up, we have Joel Klicksberg.
Okay, sorry, was unmuting. Thank you to the Elections Committee for your work in organizing this event. Friends and neighbors, I'm Joel Martin Klicksberg. I grew up in Montgomery County and live on Quincy Street with my wife, Jess, our daughter, Emmy, and our rescue Maltipoos, Bonnie and Clyde. Our corner of Quincy and Oxford is a little haven. Our neighbors welcomed us with bagels and lox, and we became truly great friends. Rarely a day goes by when we don't talk. Our community is vibrant, our neighborhood lush with trees, filled with friendship, laughter, and love. Twice last summer, 7 of our houses flooded. And then in November, a reckless developer built a spec house next door and wreaked havoc on our little haven. We talked with developers, architects, engineers, attorneys who told us about the house on Taylor with the sandbags, the house on Thornapple, the house on Chestnut with the moat. They told us about how our municipalities, other municipalities were effectively handling these issues, dealing with flooding, fixing their sidewalks, whether they own them or not. And they told us about how our municipality was failing us. My neighbors nominated me for village council so I could focus on sidewalks and flooding. But instead, during the campaigning process, I found myself constantly needing to ask the question, how do we turn the page? We need to focus on our potential as a community, reconcile and pave the way forward. Much of our collective energy has been spent on divisiveness, leaving little room for real progress. At VMA, whether it's the council or the manager, someone always quickly picks up the phone. But what I've heard from many of you is that unless you're asking for something simple like yard trash bags, within a few moments and us versus them culture emerges. I've heard many residents say that VMA tackles resident concerns through an obstructionist lens, when really VMA should be tackling resident concerns through a customer-driven lens. VMA should be fighting for its residents, not fighting its residents. As one of the most educated communities in the world, our code, our dialogue, and our actions as a municipality should match the level of intellect of our community. VMA should be smart, proactive, resident-friendly, and nimble. Our neighborhood should be walkable and safe. We should have cutting-edge solutions for the climate change challenges that confront us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. And third, Andrew Cowders.
Thank you, and let me start by thanking members of the election committee for their hard work in organizing this evening's forum and for their effort to conduct a fair election. I also want to recognize our village manager, Michael, who's done a Herculean job at streamlining our village operation, and while being pulled in a million directions, still manages to run a tight ship. Last but not least, I'm grateful to the 2 other candidates for running and their willingness to volunteer to serve our community. For those who don't know me, I've had the great honor of serving on the VMA Council for the past 22 months. My council colleagues elected me twice to serve as chair, which has given me a great vantage point on office operations and, as they say, how the sausage is made. I ran in 2021 because of a council that seemed unresponsive and didn't seem to take the concerns of its residents seriously. I was worried about my children's safety due to speeding cars on our narrow neighborhood streets. I was discouraged by the tone of our village government, how it treated one of its members in particular, and how it treated residents. I sought a council that was responsive to its residents, the residents who elected each and every council member to represent them, not lord over them. I wanted our discourse to become more civil, to lower the temperature, and for our residents to feel like they could engage and make an impact on the direction we take as a community. I also set out to push for more safety enhancements, some based on studies and reports that seemed to languish, and some because they didn't need a study, but simply needed to be implemented to protect the lives of all residents. While the job is never done, we have made progress. The sky isn't falling, it isn't all doomsday, but we have plenty of work cut out for ourselves. We depend on our residents to help identify shortcomings, whether that is in our code or in an entrenched approach to doing business. We depend on an engaged community and a proactive and responsive council. And that is my ongoing commitment to you, to promote civility, community engagement, and a council that responds to its constituents. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. So having concluded opening statements, we'll now move into the question portion of the evening. The first subject area of questions will be covered by Ben.
All right, and the first question. What do you recommend VMA should do with our reserves of $4 million? In random order, Katie, you're up first again.
Wow, I knew I was gonna be picked first. Wow, okay. And I like the use of the hat. Nice touch. Well, I am very excited for this question because we have $4.5 million budget. And we're about to vote on it in May, and I'm excited what we're voting for. I'm looking forward to increased expenditures for popular community events and additional services, including sidewalks, snow shoveling, and aging in place assistance for seniors in need. Also on the table is how to allocate the American Rescue Funds. And the following breakdown has been recommended: $240,000 for upgrading Taylor Street storm drain, $150,000 for Brookville sidewalk repairs, $30,000 for widening Quincy Street, $77,000 for street light evaluation. And you know, please don't get me started on the lack of snow this year, and that my kids never got a snow day and a chance to sled the slopes of Shepherd Park, aka Jim Johnson Field. But however, snow shoveling should always be in the VMA budgetary forecast as far as I'm concerned, and there might be several snow days ahead.
All right, Andrew.
Thanks. Well, a couple of things. First of all, our reserves are close to 4.1 or $4.2 million. And within that bucket, we have about $2.5 million that has been assigned to street improvements and capital projects. There's also the reserve fund within that. So we've as Katie just mentioned, we have a lot of projects that are going to be shovel ready, hopefully by fiscal year 24. So starting July 1, and that includes this Brookville sidewalk, where, as I mentioned before, I've been working with the previous council village manager, pardon me, to try and get the state to respond to plans that have been proposed based on the traffic study group and walkability, so that I can finally have my kids walk on the east side, I believe it is, of that sidewalk. We're also looking at studies in terms of what Joel mentioned earlier. You know, we're dealing with climate change. We have horrible clay soil below, which is granite, and we have flooding issues throughout this community, not just in Martin's Additions. And so I think it's worthwhile spending that kind of money also on further studies to deal with Quincy. We've done Taylor, as Katie mentioned, and working on a resolution, how to reconcile some of these challenges. The village engagement community budget has also been upped. I'm going to end it on that. I think it's really important to get this community together because of the divisiveness that has existed here throughout the VMA.
All right, Joel.
I think we need a modern vision for VMA. We have with the surplus the unique opportunity to complete real and much needed infrastructure improvements. The budget for the upcoming year, which needs to be approved by May 15, only seeks to have 4 small infrastructure projects totaling less than $500,000. So Katie mentioned some of them: Brookville Road for sidewalks for 150, widening Quincy for 30, upgrading Taylor Street storm drains for 240, streetlight evaluation and additional streetlights for 77. We heard council members in the last council meeting express concern that this really doesn't go nearly far enough. To me, what's most notable about the budget is what's missing from it. There's no line item for a full engineering analysis of flooding remediation. There's no line item for an engineering analysis of the remaining follow-ups to the walkability task force recommendation. These are more sort of late adds from the past few weeks than truly thought out detailed proposals and plans. When I make a decision as an executive of Meta, or what I was taught when I got a JD MBA, is I'm used to seeing options, the cost of each option, and then understanding the risks and benefits of each one so that I know what I'm selecting from. I don't think this council has done the work to get us to that place so that residents can decide. So instead, we're being forced to cherry pick from a few current proposals, many of which aren't infrastructure related. When it comes to the surplus, I think we need to do our homework, and then we need to come back to the residents. I think we can proceed forward with these existing plans, but we also need to do the homework this year, get back to residents, and try to break ground before the end of the year on key infrastructure projects.
Okay, thank you. The next question: what measures would you take to engage the VMA community and deciding on budget priorities. In random order, Joel, you're up again.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the question.
No problem. What measures would you take to engage the VMA community in deciding on budget priorities?
So I mean, I think that's very similar to what we just discussed. I think we almost need a referendum. We have to go back to the drawing board. We have to look at the walkability task force recommendations. We have to do a new, much more detailed engineering analysis, which is different from what was done with walkability. We have to look at our flooding problems. We have to look at all of the major proposals. We have to come up with these options. And then we need some sort of a referendum. We have to come back to the residents and say, here's what you're picking from. Here are the costs and benefits of each one. Here are the risks of each option. And then allow the residents to decide and go from there. It's a huge opportunity that we have. We really shouldn't squander it.
All right, thank you, Joel. Katie, you're up.
Okay. So again, what measures would you take to engage the VMA community for
In deciding on budget priorities.
urgent priorities? Okay. Well, our current village staff consists of the village manager, assistant village manager, a code enforcement and municipal operations, and a traffic engineer. We also rely on the services of our village council, Ron Bolt. We used to have a village arborist and accountant, but past councils unfortunately put it into those relationships. We do currently rely upon Mulherron tree experts for our tree nades and a volunteer tree supervisor, a VMA resident appointed by the council who does a tremendous job. That's not to say that there is a need to reevaluate who is providing these current services in the first place. And I would like to see some of our budget go to our village staff because they are hardworking. And I think additional help for our staff should be earmarked and reevaluate some former tasks that fell hard on village staff. And I also would be for allocating for studies to fix runoff, stormwater, environmental issues. We should be looking at that too.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
Thanks. Listen, I think we could do so much more. The fact is, as Katie pointed out, we have 1.5 staff members, and by half I mean we have a part-timer, and we are looking to up that budget as well to help Michael out. I've been a big proponent of listening sessions. I've talked about listening sessions in my initial run. We've had some. I think that's one way of gauging resident interest. In our conversations, day-to-day conversations, of course, items come up as well. But listening sessions are a way of bringing the community together. I think even a brunch at La Ferme helps us understand where the priorities are and where the concerns are. And the walkability study talked about these priorities, and those priorities included repairing and maintaining this walkability environment throughout the VMA, reducing traffic speeds, and improving crosswalks and signage and all that. And this is what we've heard from our residents, and this is what we're trying to do. Would I like to do things much faster? Of course. I've often said that if I could, I would put a speed bump every 10 feet on Turner Lane because of the pickup and drop-offs at Shepherd Park. But whatever study we had in the past, probably part of this and the traffic group didn't allow for that because there was not enough traffic going up and down Turner Lane, but the risks to our children are the same. So I think listening sessions would be helpful, and we've had them and we'll continue to have them to hear from our residents.
Thank you, Andrew. The next question. Where do you stand on a proposal to use part of the village's large fiscal surplus to shovel snow from the sidewalks of all VMA residents? What about proposals to cover snow removal from sidewalks and private walkways for village residents who meet certain criteria? And Andrew, you're up first.
Finally, Jesus. I mean, going third, no fun. Well, number one, we're proposing to increase the budget on snow removal. We've had, based on our past surveys, asked this question, and it's been a slight majority that has requested snow removal from private walkways, as I recall, or an interest in it. And among that majority, I think there was a majority that said they do it themselves. But we've heard from enough residents, elderly residents, that have asked us to do this. And in sitting down with Michael and Arthur, our treasurer, and putting together this budget, we've said we have the funds and we must do this. It's in the best interest of our residents, and we must move forward and have a consistent budget year after year, even if we don't have snow, to address this challenge for the safety of our residents and to provide a service. This is what we're in the business of, providing a service or services to our residents, and to be responsive to them. We, on my street alone, we have residents who we're fortunate enough to have a relationship with them to where we're allowed to bring their newspapers to their front door, because it might be a challenge to get to the curb, and snow would make that even more difficult in these instances. So I'm all for it, and we have it in the budget, and I'm assuming and hopeful that it will pass.
All right, Joel, you're next.
Yeah, when it comes to sidewalk shoveling for those in need, the VMA is estimating that it would cost, there's about 25 houses that would enroll, and it would cost about $4,000 per storm. We're budgeting around $15,000 for the service. I think this makes sense. Most people supported it, about 58% supported it, 42% opposed it. This makes sense not only because we're helping our neighbors who are in need, but also because if you're walking down a sidewalk and it's not shoveled, you too have a threat that as you try to walk through that sidewalk. So it makes sense both for those who are in need and for those who are using the sidewalk that otherwise wouldn't be shoveled.
Thank you, Joel. Katie?
Well, this is the third budget related question in a row. So obviously this matters to residents. And I already, I think, gave my support to snow removal and shoveling. I would want that included because that's one of the issues I'm running on, is better resident relations. And that is a residential relationship. And I do support allocating funds to helping everyone in our neighborhood. And also on that note, since snow shoveling kind of goes with another point I pointed out, I think we could also use some of the budget to rethink our communications issues, maybe revamp our website that could offer more information about inclement weather, maybe an SMS text messaging system that would say, in addition to, major snowfall, this pipe down by Turner Lane has caused, freezing over water. So avoid that area at all costs. I think that kind of is part of it too. I think we need an overall inclement weather plan, and budgeting for snow removal is just part of it, and more of part of our relations, and should be offered.
Thank you, Katie. Next question. Do you have a position on whether the village should cover the cost of composting as it does for other collection costs? And Katie, you're up.
Yes, I do. I am supportive of composting. It's good for the environment. I also think that we should have some other services that are popular with residents. From the annual survey, it's not one that gets the most people involved, but I think we could do a better job of explaining kind of the benefits of it if we offer this service, because I think that's I think that's one of our issues, is we need better communication, and we need to explain the benefits of composting. Maybe do an article in our Martin's Edition newsletter about it. I don't think we're utilizing this service enough. And I think more residents, if they knew more about it or the benefits of it, it would kind of, equal why we do it. And I would like to, expand on that.
Thank you. Joel?
Yeah, I do like the environment. However, we can contribute. But let's look at this analytically. Again, we need to look at this as a governmental and business problem. Currently, about 65 households privately subscribe for composting services. If made available to all households, the VMA expects about 1/3 of households or 100 homes to opt into the composting program. It would cost the village around $22,800. In our recent survey, 47% support, 53% oppose. Numbers are fairly split. But our community, many members really want this. So this is a service that we can provide to them for a fairly low cost. Unless there are very strong oppositions or other voices that I'm not considering, I think it makes sense to proceed forward here. You might not personally benefit from the composting service because you choose not to use it, but there will be other services that you do use that others don't.
And finally, Andrew. Thank you, Joel.
As one of those subscribers to the compost crew, I'm a big supporter of composting. I view it as, you know, we have waste services, recycling, yard waste, and composting could be that fourth, and there'll be future opportunities for other services that I think we should help our residents. And I do recall the survey was surprising to me, and this might go to Katie's point, maybe it needs to be communicated better and explained better. But I think as we are encouraged to contribute to the Manna food drive, and at the same time throw food into the trash at record levels, it's worthy of our support. So that's why it's in the budget as well, and that's why I'm supportive of it.
Thank you, Andrew. For the next section will be about village atmosphere, and I'll pass the hat over to Allison.
And speak up. Yes, this
Yeah.
way.
All right, village atmosphere. First question. I don't know if this is yes or no or more explanation, but the question is, did you approve the adoption of the new VMA ethics ordinance? And Joel, you're first.
Okay, so I am not on the council, so I did not vote on the ethics ordinance. However, I have spent a lot of time talking about the ethics ordinance over the past few years. You know, I think we need an ethics code and we need ethical council members and leaders. It's important, full stop. But as a community, we are focused on the wrong ethical dilemmas right now. There has not been a single ethics complaint filed. We really need to turn the page, be ethical, generally just be ethical and move on from this portion. I think we spent about the past 3 years on it. We also need to do the ethical thing and help our neighbors whose houses are flooded. Andrew, I met the nicest lady just a few houses down from you. I'm sure you know her well. Her property after some 30 years of ownership is flooding. So all she can do is grow bamboo in her backyard to absorb it. Katie, I've heard you talk about flooding, you know, really heart-wrenching stories. I know you live just a few houses down the street from a house whose sandbags adorn its driveway. I think that the true ethics issue is that we should be focusing on how we could help our neighbors whose properties are flooding with the practical, real problems they're facing instead of the theoretical ones. Ethics is very important. We've done a lot of work here, but now we need to turn the page.
Okay, thank you. Andrew.
Hi, yes, I serve on the council and I did vote in favor of this latest ethics ordinance to basically bring in line and make consistent what is already existing in our code. I'm not particularly worried about ethical transgressions by our volunteers. I think, as Joel pointed out, there haven't been any complaints, but I do believe that without the existing ordinance, there was really no mechanism to pursue a complaint. And this latest ordinance just would bring some of the other non-statutory committees into compliance and make it basically Montgomery County or at the state level a similar level of law or code. It's a way to be discreet and to allow for both the ethics committee and for the council to weigh in and give folks a fair shot that didn't exist before. I think there's a lot of hair on fire when things like this are discussed. I remember the first round where there was a lot of misinformation that got me riled up and confused and frustrated. But I see the committee members as earnest, truthful, and hardworking, the ethics committee members. And I decided that what they presented was the right thing to do, and I voted for it, and it didn't pass, and that's democracy. So I was pleased how that evening transpired, and we're moving on.
Okay, thank you. Katie.
Well, I am on the council and I voted against the ethics ordinance. I felt it was unnecessary, and quite frankly, we spent an inordinate amount of time on an ordinance, and it's time to put our focus on some other necessary issues in this village. The ordinance was a two-parter. There was another part of it that took away a notary requirement so that we could get more, make it easier, more convenient for village residents when they want to work for a village committee. That I did vote for because I want to make things as easy as possible for residents to volunteer, because we need residents to volunteer. And quite frankly, some residents probably feel we spent way too much time on the wrong things. That can be their assessment. But, I will say that I think the stressors of the pandemic and some poor decision-making that predates my time or Andrew's time on the council caused an environment which Andrew and I started to serve in 2021 when we entered as freshman council members. But these issues have created the image of some sort of sophomore slump, which I want to clarify is not the case. I think we were both dedicated and optimistic to help with ethical dilemmas and get things done. But now we can move forward and pass the ethics ordinance.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, a longtime resident noted that they have noticed far fewer people attend council and committee meetings. Some have been discouraged, not just by the length of the meetings, but because volunteers who are working for the community are subjected to constant criticism. What would you do about this? Katie, you're first.
Oh, that just breaks my heart, quite honestly. I mean, I lived here the longest, I think. Not the oldest council member, but I've lived here the longest since 1980, like I said. And I have noticed at council meetings, I get excited. I mean, I'm always grateful for those who attend all our meetings, but these meetings were for all of you. I want to see more residents. I want to see representatives from each street. I think we should give prizes out, like how many residents from Taylor attended, how many residents from Chestnut, have a little like game going, because this is where we do the bulk of our talking in business. And it's awful to me if anyone feels disrespected or rejected and how our council proceeds. Now, I would like to say it has been a pleasure and an honor to work with Andrew as our chair. He's going to roll his eyes because he always said, you can say it's a pleasure, but don't say it's an honor. But I will say he has gone above and beyond to make the meetings as congenial as possible and let as many people talk. So maybe the word is not out yet, but everyone is always welcome to come to our council meetings, our committee meetings. We want to see more people, whether you're the longest living resident here or you just moved in.
Thank you. Joel, you're next.
Yeah, I was running to focus on flooding and sidewalks, but I've ended up understanding a lot more about these issues and the problems that we face. Look, I respect our current council leadership, and I really do think they intend to do well. Katie and Andrew are both determined volunteer public servants who've been trying to move us past this moment. But something's failing here. I spent the last few weeks trying to pin what it is that's failing here, asking folks, how do we move forward from here? I think in a challenging political climate, our council's leadership approach has been to put out fires. And the problem with the putting out fires approach to leadership is that you're not really leading, you're managing. And you can really only manage one fire at a time, especially in a volunteer position. That fire the past few years being election and ethics and that whole basket. I think what we need for leadership is someone who will point in a particular direction and say, that's where we need to go. Let's align on that path and head on that journey together. Grab each person by the arm, bring your skills to bear on that journey, adding what we can as a community. I think we move forward from here by focusing on the infrastructure improvements our community needs, especially for public safety. I think there were sort of bullet points at the very bottom of the agenda this last council meeting, and instead they should be the main thing that we discuss moving forward. I think in many ways our community has lost some hope in local government, and we need to turn the page. We need to stop talking about what happened and start talking about what should be. As I've stated before, right, VMA needs to be fighting for its residents, not fighting its residents. VMA needs to have a customer-driven lens, not an obstructionist one. VMA needs to be have a participatory government, but it must also get things done for its residents.
Thank you. Andrew, you're last, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I don't know what the numbers used to be, but I definitely think they they lack a great deal. We have a core group of folks that attend every week, but that's about it. I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so I'm not hearing, nor do I think that any VMA resident has given up on anything. So I don't know who Joel is speaking to, but I'd love to speak to those folks too, because I'm not hearing that in my conversations. I think we can put out fires and we can move ahead with projects. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Now, does it consume a lot of our time when there are entrenched interests that fight each other, from residents to council members? It does take time to address that, and it's a burden on our village staff as well. Having said that, and I'm going to say it again, and as long as I'm on the council, I'm going to encourage this. We meet once a month, and once a month only as a council. There are listening sessions we can do. We can do, special events, etc. And I've instituted a policy where folks are not limited to speaking at the beginning or at the end, and not able to chime in during deliberations. I believe that disenfranchises folks when they're limited to speak during these meetings. And so I've encouraged more of it as long as it was germane and civil. And I continue to work on that. And it's a work in progress. And as Katie said, we inherited something that cannot be turned on the dime in terms of the atmospherics and the relationships that are pre-existing our terms on the council.
Okay, thank you. This is the last question on village atmosphere. Katie, you're going to be first. As a council member, if you believed that a committee volunteer had acted inappropriately, what would be the best method to address the situation, and what should be available to residents to respond?
Now, this is I just want to clarify, this is if a committee member, not a council member, correct? Correct. Committee member, okay. Yes, well, I think the council should be the absolute decision on that, because committees do serve at the pleasure of the council, and that's one of the things we vote on, are their appointments. And like I said, we need residents. We want residents to volunteer, and we want to make this as welcoming an environment as possible. But that said, there have been some factions and differences on committees, and there have been hurt feelings and resignations for different reasons. And it's always kind of a one step forward, two step back. But if a fellow committee member, if I'm understanding the question, has a problem with another committee member, I mean, we do have an ethics committee and we have a whole process in place. But I do think in those sorts of situations involving residents, first we need to rope the council in. The council needs to be involved, and that's what I have to say on that.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Thanks for that question. And without going into greater detail as to the existing ethics ordinance, it's exactly that is needed to give the accused the ability to work through a process that is existing, and not some kind of loosey-goosey approach to any kind of accusation. I think the accused person or respondent has the ability to work his or her way through that system. I do believe that the committee, an independent committee, should be the initial arbiter and address the issue and the complaint, and either make a referral then where the council gets notified. But the council is not political in the sense of Democrats versus Republicans, but it's a political entity. So if it were against a council member, that council member would want to say, no problem, there's no ethical issue here. You want an independent body like an ethics committee, and I think this is the case in the county, in the state, to look at any complaint in all seriousness. So as Joel mentioned earlier, we haven't had any, thankfully. I imagine that a respondent might approach a council member for advice, but that's why we have a process that is fair, that is balanced, that is not in any way subjective, and I appreciate that.
Okay, Joel, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this would be a heartbreaking scenario and absent, whatever's happened in VMA over the past few years or hasn't happened in VMA. This is fairly unusual for volunteer positions, right? That's the reality. Most people who are volunteers tend to act ethically, right? They're pursuing a greater good. That said, this is a really fairly simple question. We follow the code. There's a code that was passed, right? In law school and business school, in both places, they taught me the same thing. If there's a law that was passed, you have to follow the rule of law. You try to do it as respectfully as possible, but you follow the law.
Anything else to the fearless leader?
All right, thank you, Kenneth. So for our third section of questions, we're going to do a handful of questions related to the election process. So our first question is, do you believe that the election committee should filter questions for the VMA Council Candidates Forum in advance? Will you ensure that voters can ask live questions at the VMA Forum next year? So up first is Joel.
Yeah, I think if you ask most residents whether the last election was conducted fairly, and we asked them in a survey, and 94% said that the election was conducted in a fair and open manner. There's an issue with our discourse, right, where we spend a whole section of our debate talking about elections, and where we spend a whole section of our debate talking about ethics and the temperature of our politics. And we need to move past this point. There are real issues in our municipality, right? Almost every street has flooding. Many of our neighbors' homes are flooding. Our sidewalk in Brookville, it's not the safest sidewalk. It really could use some improvements. We need to focus on the issues that most residents want us to focus on. I know that the past few years have been hard. I really respect the work that Andrew and Katie have done to try to move us forward, but we need to find how to turn the page.
Thank you. Next, Katie.
Yes, I think live questions should be incorporated, and I would support that next year. This is my fourth time running. It took 3 times to get elected to the council. The third time was the charm, and now I'm fighting to keep my seat. So yes, I think live questions are appreciated, and the reason why is because the pandemic has forever changed us. Some people are not comfortable, going into a setting and having the old style, how we used to have this very forum in the village office. The Zoom is the most convenient way to offer this opportunity for residents to participate. I love how many people are on here and actually attending this forum tonight. So we want to hear from as many of you as possible. And so, yes, I am completely supportive of that. I hope you find a way to incorporate that next year. But at the same time, I do appreciate the hard work of the election committee to date. I know you're dealing with a lot there. This out of the hat is a very interesting approach. I like that too. But yes, I think it would be great to incorporate some of our voices that are on here in live time. So yes, I would be supportive of that.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
I'm not sure the election plan was a beast, but I was under the impression that the election committee had the ability to do so, and maybe I don't recall that correctly. Either way, I think live questions would bring a different kind of energy into this forum, and I think it'd be fun to have that, and I think it'd be important. Some members of the community want to remain anonymous. Others don't mind asking such questions. I also think that filtering questions is not a bad idea for the purpose of just making sure that there isn't anything inappropriate said or asked in a question, but it should not be filtered on the basis of election committee members' preference in terms of subject matter, et cetera. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Andrew. So for our next question, should elections in Martin's Additions continue to be managed by an independent election committee, or should the council members be allowed to play a greater role in managing their own elections? Katie, you are first.
Well, I get a lot of resident questions about this, and I will get even more when the ballots arrive and the Electech address says New Jersey, and they're like, why am I sending my ballot to Jersey? And not that there's anything wrong with New Jersey, a fine state. I have many relatives there. So, it is a question that comes up because depending on when you moved here, you were used to the sidewalk celebration and the ability to vote, and it was our official election day, and it brings back lots of great memories. And the last sidewalk celebration was 2019. And so I think we have found an excellent hybrid or tandem option for this year that I'm excited that the Community Engagement Committee is going to work in tandem with the Election Committee. Andrew and I are co-liaisons on the Community Engagement Committee. They are working hard to bring back the sidewalk celebration to give people a chance so that you can drop off your mail-in ballot and still have that experience of community gathering at the sidewalk celebration. There are pros and cons to mail-in voting. I will say it's convenient, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. We get the most participation that way, and we want the most, obviously we want the most residents to vote if they can. So if we did return to in-person voting, I wonder if those numbers would dwindle. So there has been success, I will say, with the mail-in voting, but I could go either way on that, on voting on that.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
So the question was about whether or not there should be an independent election committee versus the council managing elections. Just as with the ethics committee, I would be really concerned if the council, including incumbents, would be managing the election. I think it's important to have an independent committee that works to ensure that we have a transparent, fair, and consistent process here year after year, so that there aren't any questions asked. As it is in the upcoming Martin's Edition newsletter, I'm not going to be writing what was required of me, a monthly column or letter to the community, because it coincides with these elections. So I think we want to do our very best to make sure that there is no advantage to incumbency. It's easier said than done. Obviously, there's maybe more name recognition for the incumbents, but it appears that Joel has been walking the community successfully and speaking to a lot of our fellow residents. So I think the independence of this election is critical, and I don't think that can be done with a council running it.
Thank you, Andrew. Joel?
Well, first of all, Andrew, I think you should write the column. I think everybody knows your name. Your name recognition's got to be 100%. I'd like to read the column. I think it's fantastic. So anyway, with regards to the question, in an usual process, an elections committee, such as what we have structured now, is usually sufficient to run elections, right? You don't tend to see many irregularities. What's happened here over the past couple of years is fairly irregular, right? The temperature around our elections and the elections process is fairly irregular. I think that the bigger question that we need to ask here is about the health of our community and how we move forward, how we push forward, how we find things that we have in common, that we share, the interests, our passions for our community. How do we look forward and focus on those? And hopefully we won't have such issues, right? We won't have to keep debating the structure of our elections committee. I think that that's the priority. With regards to the mail-in vote, the mail-in option, I think it's been fairly popular. It would be difficult to reverse it if it's been fairly popular, but I do love an in-person mail vote, and I'm very much looking forward to experiencing the in-person election on the 10th. So thank you, Elections Committee, and I actually think it's the Community Engagement Committee for organizing.
Thank you, Joel. For our third question in the election section, the question is, do you think the council should have the power to be able to cancel VMA elections? Andrew, you are first.
I don't think the council, unless there are extraordinary measures or situations natural disasters or as I said, the doomsday scenario should have that ability. I think there was during COVID, the council took some action related to the governor's then declaration, but I think unless there are extraordinary circumstances, I don't see a reason why the council should cancel an election. I can't even imagine what that kind of scenario would be. But I think again, the independence of the committee is my singular focus in keeping that in place. And so it would be self-serving possibly for a council to do so. But again, I think that there's hopefully not a scenario where this would exist, with the exception of pandemics that did require some sort of adjustment. I don't recall what was done, but there were some adjustments to the election process back then.
Thank you, Andrew. Joel?
Yeah, the answer is no. The charter, I think, requires an annual election. We follow the law, so the answer is no.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. Katie?
I don't know how I can say this emphatically enough, but no, absolutely not. I will say, just to point out something that sometimes people wonder what I was saying about mailing our ballots up to Electech, is running an election costly? So some people question kind of the cost of running an election, especially if two incumbents are running for whatever their seats and they fill the number of seats that are open. I do know there have been nearby municipalities who just didn't have an election because they just didn't have any contest. But I think that's ridiculous. It's our democratic process. You deliver that to the residents. We're so fortunate to even have residents who, are not from America, they're international, and they get a chance to vote in elections in their very own neighborhood. So why would you take that opportunity away? Even if it's just, incumbents in a year, incumbents are running and there's not interest from other people to run. That said, this Joel, he's keeping Andrew and me on our toes. So, and I welcome him to the party. And so, no, I don't find there's ever a reason to cancel an election.
Thank you, Katie. So before we move to our final section of questions, it does look like we are going to have some time available. So we will have some extra time available during the session. So if people do have questions they would like to submit, again, you can submit them via the chat function in Zoom. You can email the committee inbox and we will field some questions for there. So before we get to those, we're going to turn it over to Eric.
The fourth category was transportation, and we had two questions on that topic. The first one is, have you given any thought to improving access to Bethesda without using a car or Uber? This resident suggested ideas such as coordinating with other sections to support a shuttle across Bradley or even a paying shuttle, and would like to know if the candidates have any other creative ideas. The order for this is Joel, Katie, Andrew. Joel, any response?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And we seem to be thinking about a lot of these linearly, like what can VMA pay for? But I think we could be thinking a lot about some of these questions as how can VMA organize as a municipality, as other municipalities have very successfully done, to obtain more services for its residents. This seems like a great project for the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. It's one we should explore with other municipalities and join together to discuss this one and many other ones. But let me also take the opportunity to talk about sidewalks. Actually, I'm not going to do that because there's not enough time. Thank you.
Katie?
Oh, that's an excellent idea and question. I would be interested in working with our neighboring municipalities on a joint effort on that, and consulting with state and county officials to how we could make that happen. Maybe we could have a meeting of the minds. I've always been a proponent of inviting the other municipalities and having a meeting with us to discuss that kind of effort that would affect not just VMA residents, but Chevy Chase proper. And commuting to Bethesda is a major problem. I mean, any of the roads you take into Bethesda, they are basically the equivalent of like Vermont covered bridges. I mean, you wait and it takes 30 minutes to get into Bethesda just to drive and do an errand. So yes, I think this is something though that goes above us and beyond us. So I think we would have to work with our neighbors, our neighboring friends across Brookville on this issue, but I would be supportive of that.
Andrew?
Sure. I love walking into Bethesda. It is quite a walk. I mean, 25 minutes or so, and I bike into Bethesda. I actually think I had this conversation with the person who sent in that question, a resident, I believe, on Quincy. And I really like the idea of coordinating a shuttle. But in the meantime, as we try to explore this with our friendly neighboring jurisdictions, I think we could in the immediate future put together a list of volunteers, folks that might be retired and still like to drive, and offer themselves up to residents, elderly residents who like to go into Bethesda to shop or need to go into Bethesda to run errands at the supermarket, or even come down to Connecticut Avenue south of the Circle to go to the Safeway and other locations. I think that would be an easy thing to do, to put out a call for volunteers who are available during the day and can offer up their vehicles as rides to drop off folks and to pick them up again. But in the meantime, sure, it'd be of great interest to coordinate and see if other Section 3 or 5 have something in place, or other Rolling Wood folks to coordinate a solution there. And this came up in a conversation with someone who's, I believe, not eager to drive into Bethesda, and the walk is too far. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. The second question under transportation was, what do you think of purchasing rights of way or easements to ensure shortcuts that connect village streets? And the order for this is Andrew, Katie, Joel. Andrew?
Yeah, I've heard this discussion as well. I think it's tricky. I mean, I know that there folks that cut through Paul Weller's property to go from Raymond to Brennan, and that's an adventure and an experience in and of itself, of beautiful property and just a fascinating walk that I experienced on occasion. We have another one, I think, from Turner to Taylor. At the tail end of Turner, there I believe is a possibility. I'm not sure there's an easement, but I don't know if this would require eminent domain and taking away people's properties and putting in a sidewalk. I think whatever connects this community, and the lack of that ability is a good idea, but I think the impact on individual homeowners might be too great, or the willingness to do so might not be there among homeowners.
Katie?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. I mean, I think tricky is a good word for it. I recently, like I said, I don't want to keep going on about growing up here since the 80s, but I've lived here a long time, and Susan Kahn was the first person to show me that cut through from Brennan Lane, and I was flabbergasted. I never knew that that was there. And I know that there used to be a popular way you could come from the end of Turner Lane and cut through Taylor, because I've heard from a lot of people who said it would be so much easier if they could just cut through the end of Turner to Taylor, dog walkers, kids up that hill, which is still excellent exercise. But I think it would be hard because, and like in that case, for example, that went on someone's private property, and it would have to be up to that person to allow that. So it's like these byways and ways to get cut throughs through the neighborhood, who would they affect necessarily? And if it may be a case by case basis, maybe if a neighbor is willing to kind of craft that for their residents as something neighborly to do, then sure, we could help with facilitate that. But I do think that could be a little tricky. Yes.
Joel?
Yeah, something sounds lovely about this idea. I actually saw this great map in the Walkability Task Force findings where they drew, there's two ways now to get to the park. There's two ways to get around our neighborhood. And of course, it's very enticing because Brookville Road is so dangerous. And I think the real problem is that Brookville Road is so dangerous, right? I've heard from so many of you who don't want to walk with your strollers on Brookville Road, who don't want to walk your dogs on Brookville Road, like Andrew, who doesn't allow his teens on Brookville Road. And, the solution is not to be repossessing our neighbor's property in order to find a new path. The solution is to fix Brookville Road.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everyone who has been sending in some questions. So we're gonna be asking a couple of questions. These will be a little less kind of one topic focused than the last several sections have been, because these are some of the questions that have been submitted via the chat. So up first is a question that relates to something that has been discussed during tonight's forum. How would you address flooding in VMA? Joel, you're up first.
Okay, all right. So as I've knocked on doors these past few weeks, many of you shared that almost every single street in VMA is experiencing flooding, right? Some unfortunate and do not live with this anxiety. But those that are not as fortunate share devastating stories with me, right? One of you talked about in the summer of 22, you were in the car in front of your house with your children as a river was headed towards your car and you couldn't get out. Your children were terrified. One of you told me about how you worked your whole adult lives to buy this dream house. You bought the dream house and then it's flooded. And then several of you told me about you bought your property, 10, 20, 30 years ago, and you didn't have any flooding, and now you have flooding every year. The reality is that climate change is here, right? We went from 2 to 4 episodes per year before 2010 of urban flooding in Montgomery County to 11 to 39 per year today. Martin's Addition shares in the responsibility to protect the properties in our streets, but we've made little, if any, progress. The reality is hard to accept, right? On this one, our municipality is failing us. This should be one of the primary topics that we're focused on. Andrew and Katie, I'm gonna keep you to it. I'm gonna hold you, as you said, I'm gonna keep you on your toes. They're gonna talk tonight about their plans for the Taylor Street drain improvements. Andrew, I got a call from a bunch of people saying the first time they heard about this was in your elections flyer. It's great progress. We need a lot more of it. I think the village council can bring about substantive results on flooding. It can advocate for and secure additional improvements from the public utilities, pass and enforce more stringent drain regulations, and make its own proactive structural improvements.
Thank you, Joel. Andrew?
Just first of all, wanted to respond to Joel. My kids act like teens, but they're not teens. I still will not let them walk on that sidewalk until we have a plan in place and fix it in coordination with the state. So I'm sorry that whoever you spoke to is the first time they heard in my flyer about this. I would encourage them to attend council meetings and to read our budget. But this is something that we've discussed as soon as we got the ARPA funds and even before, because it's been an ongoing issue, and so we're definitely working on it. I've discussed with our village manager the idea of these engineering studies. I think I mentioned it at the beginning of this forum, and how critically important that is. I worked in the late 90s on a climate change task force at the White House during the Clinton administration. We talked about these issues back then. They're only getting worse, and I recognize that. At the same time, while we want to have these studies not languish, and we want to implement whatever guidance we get, we also have to work within the confines, as was said today, of the code, and helping our residents as best as possible, and not be obstructionist. But there are times when people have different interpretations of what is in place. It doesn't solve the issue. We need to fix it, and I encourage these studies so that we can use the funds that we have to fix this and protect homeowners, such as everyone here on this Zoom call.
Thank you, Andrew. Katie?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to say to the residents of Quincy and Taylor who incur frequent flooding, I'm sorry. The issue of flooding should really be renamed or retitled when aging infrastructure meets massive building projects, greedy builders, and the history that we are supposedly on the tops of streams and creeks. And I'm very concerned with flooding in the VMA. Taylor Street neighbors of mine have been dealing with flooding issues for several years. And I still have PTSD from when my home was constantly flooded by a house being built on Turner behind my Taylor Street home almost 10 years ago. And that at that point, we had to remedy the situation with Montgomery County because it was deemed environmental rather than go to the council. And as there are things the council can and can't currently do. And in case my neighbor's case and other examples around the VMA, it starts with the builder. As a council, we need to be stricter in improving plans and making sure the builder is cognizant of potential flooding issues with our aging infrastructure. And I will admit that during my time on the council, there have been instances where the latest information regarding these building issues haven't been shared with the full council. And that's part of my stance on improved communication. So I propose a new task force committee to study the sources of flooding and stormwater runoff, how to correct damage, make preparations for the future. And one thing I've learned though, Joel, from being knee deep in water myself, is that when you finally get elected to the council, it's no longer personal. You have to consider the greater good of all the residents, their money, which is our budget, and not always just personal needs, but I commiserate.
Thank you, Katie. So our second question relates to what is your position on the current levels that the village is paying for off-duty police officers, and what potential changes you would recommend in those levels or any programs related to that? Andrew, you are first.
Another great question. We've talked about this in the past about the level of public safety and the break-ins that have occurred in cars and homes, and how effective our current police officers are in the, I don't know if it's 10 hours a week that they either sit in unmarked cars at Taylor and Brookville. I think in terms of compensation, my understanding is other off-duty police officers are compensated at a higher rate, but in terms of effectiveness, and these are conversations I've also had with Michael, our village manager, there's no real accountability that we're aware of in terms of when they're here, when they're not here. And so I would propose and have discussed with Michael a way to address that and figure out how we can coordinate more closely with them. I like their additional presence, but to date, as I've reported out to the community before I was on the council with my various Nest Cam videos, folks cruising our streets, checking cars and front or back doors have not been caught here. So in terms of effectiveness, not sure what kind of deterrent they've been, but for some residents, it's a safety blanket just to know that we have them in addition to the county police here in the community.
Thank you, Andrew. Joel?
Though the numbers don't show it, there's general crime in our community. Katie, I remember a story that you told in particular, and I'm sorry to hear about your flooding issues, of course. I know how devastating it can be. On February 6th, there were at least 5 cars that were stolen around the Broad Branch area. As early, residents left, the thieves were able to start the cars by swiping the self-start feature from the keys in the mudrooms. Just last week, there were a bunch of car break-ins on Oxford Street, which is my neighboring street. Just yesterday afternoon, there was an armed robbery on Rittenhouse. Some 2 months ago, I caught a thief next door as little Emmy was upstairs sleeping, and I had to call and wait for Montgomery County Police, which took quite a while as I watched the thief make multiple rounds. So there is general crime in the area. I don't know that the 10-hour patrol is the right solution. I've heard very positive reports from residents in Chevy Chase Village about their police department. I think what I'd be curious to explore is more options like collaborating much more closely with our neighboring municipalities on this particular issue.
Thank you, Joel. Katie?
Now, I know I just said that when you get elected to the council, you can't make things personal, but as a victim of car theft from my own driveway, you could say I have some strong feelings on the matter. In my case, the thieves were part of a district crime ring, and many of this group are not even old enough to drive cars legally. These men, boys, ranged 14 to 18 years in age, were possibly armed, crept into my home in the middle of the night, and they did it by coming onto my back porch. It was very well lit, looking into a window, spotting my spare key ring, breaking in and taking my key fob. And our family made the painful discovery of a missing car later that morning. Fortunately, my car was found by the following evening and it has been since restored, but I remain shaken by the what ifs. What if a member of my home heard the noise, got up to investigate, and was shot or stabbed, like many of the headlines in local news and local crimes today? And since our family scare, my next door neighbor's Cadillac was also stolen, and my neighbor a few doors from me on Chestnut, his Land Rover was stolen. So what if some similar brazen event happens in VMA, but this time it's deadly? And it makes me feel the slightest bit insured that we have officers Nick Percerno and Mike Pratt, who can react to situations and call backup. I'm in favor of spreading the wealth of their surveillance to different streets and other pockets of the VMA, and not just next to Brookville Shopping Center. We could better utilize their services provided to residents. But I'm supportive of measures to fund updates and enhance lighting on our streets, because well-lit areas can also help deter crime incidents. I'm also supportive of adding security cameras,
Katie.
and they have been instrumental in solving
Katie.
crimes.
So actually, that's gonna lead into the next question that was submitted was, there was some discussion about general public safety issues such as car theft. What other measures would you propose to address crime in the village? So Katie, you are up first.
Oh, okay, just go right into it then. Okay. As I was saying, I'll just piggyback off of it. I think we could better utilize officers Nick and Pratt. We could have them move around. We need to hear from you all about where you think they should be patrolling. I also think enhancing our lighting would help, because there are studies that show that well-lit areas help deter crime. The police officers, MCPD, told me security cameras are it that helps them with 90% of their job right now. In my case, when my car was stolen, they went right up to Brookville Supermarket, asked Joe and Josie to review their footage, and they were able to pinpoint what direction they went, what time it happened. So there's something to be said for that as well. So yes, I'm supportive of all of those measures to help, because I wouldn't want anyone to go through what our family went through. I also think that an SMS, like a text system, a better alerting system helps with public safety as well. And that's something I've championed and was looking into with our former village manager, Niles Andrick. How that would happen is it would be sort of like what Montgomery County's public schools use, or Montgomery County government, to spread the word about, street closures, incidents, gas leaks, whatever you want. It would help with that. And so I also think that falls under public safety, and I would position for that.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
Yeah, and I hope I didn't jinx it when many, many years ago, following, I think it was Officer Nick's comments, that we're so lucky in our community that we don't have violent crime or any real concerns versus some other areas of the county that they work in. When I said it is just a few footsteps from a car door to a front door, because I was just not ready to accept that we shouldn't worry just because there are teams going around checking car doors. And voila, here we had an incident, a perfect example where teens or adults entered a home to steal a car, and so I empathize a great deal. I think we talked about a couple of things as well in the past that I feel strongly about. There are privacy concerns, of course, but there were suggestions about cameras at the entrance to our street that can record license plates of cars entering the streets. My patio doorbell and driveway camera cannot pick up a license plate of cars. Maybe, you know, the make and model, if you're lucky. The other thing is our current police force, they're senior level and advanced in their career, so they work in unmarked cars, pros and cons. I like the idea of a marked car as a deterrent, and I think it might be helpful to increase the hours, but also have accountability. I think that's one of the issues that I've had over the years.
Thank you, Andrew. Joel?
Yeah, I mean, look, I lived in LA with my wife Jess, and where crime was rampant. In a period of 7 years, I was robbed 4 times, literally 4 interactions with thieves. We left LA in part because we didn't want Emmy growing up in that. We didn't want to live in that anymore. So it pains me when I see things like that happening around here. When I grew up in Montgomery County, it was one of the safest places in the world. I think it probably still is, but it's pretty heartbreaking to see these crimes and thefts. So there's a lot that we can learn from other communities here, right? There are ways for us, you know, most theft is petty theft, misdemeanor theft, you know, carjackings. It's simple crimes, right? It's people who are just trying to they're looking to make a quick buck. So when they see that a particular community has a elite police presence or has a presence of safety, they're much more likely to avoid that community. So I like some of the ideas that I've heard so far on signage and lighting. I think those things are critical. There's also other things that we can do. One of the most successful crime prevention mechanisms is, you know, Nest doorbell cams, making sure that people have cameras. Other communities have used their surpluses to give credits to residents who purchase security cameras. Those are the types of options that we could consider to make sure that we continue to improve the safety of our citizens.
Thank you, Joel. So our next question relates to a statement that was made by the VMA budget auditor at the February 2023 Village Council meeting, when the auditor commented that the VMA had another really good year in which the village took in revenues in excess of expenditures. Would you support implementing a tax rebate similar to the one that Section 5 has been giving to its residents for years? So first, Joel.
Okay, this is a very good question. Look, I think this is in the bucket of what we need to do is we need a cost benefit analysis, a risk benefit analysis, and we need clear costs for each of the options that we're considering. Like with a lot of other things, I understand that we have been told that we can't give money back because it's illegal. But I think we need to ask more questions here. I understand, as you stated, that Section 5 has given money back. I know other municipalities offer rebates for security cameras, which I just mentioned. I'm not saying we should necessarily give money back, but we should make sure to tease out all of the options and then offer them to residents along with the potential infrastructure projects. It's a lot easier to say, it's a lot more thoughtful to say, would you prefer to have $6,000 back or better sidewalks than it is to just consider these options in the ether. I think we need to ask the right questions, and then I think we need to present people with clear options.
Thank you, Joel. Andrew?
So a good point, Joel. And I think we've been asking those questions of our council, SEL, not CIL. So our village lawyer, who actually, I believe, recommended against what Section 5 is doing. I don't know if Ron represents Section 5, but his assessment, legal assessment, was that no, we cannot do that. Even if Section 5 has been doing it, if local municipalities start following that example, that there are risks, and there still may be risks that Section 5 is exposed to in terms of getting revenues from the county, that the county might shut it down. So these are, I think, a resident estimated about $1,500 that residents would receive, which is real money. I get that, but based on legal counsel's recommendation, it's just not a risk that we can take if he is determined it's not legal. I'm not a lawyer. There appears to be a lawyer on this among our candidates here today, but I have a tradition of following advice of legal counsel, so I'd be against it.
Thank you, Andrew. Katie?
Well, as I relayed in my opening statement, I come from humble beginnings. And I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an executive, just a federal worker. So I don't know if this will come back to haunt me to admit, but my combined household income is probably on the lower or lowest end of the spectrum compared to other residents who live in the VMA. I also live in an aging house that turns 100 years old next year and is in need of constant repairs. So of course, I would support any form of monetary relief for residents in similar boats like mine and help other families and other residents on fixed incomes or retirement. That said, but the current tax rebate proposal and what has been tested in another neighboring municipality, Section 5, is not necessarily foolproof, because such a tax rebate poses potential issues with the state and county. More research is needed before I would feel comfortable casting a vote, because the worst scenario would be to distribute such funds to residents, but in the long run, they pose a headache and possibly more of a hardship, and that we have to pay someone bigger than us back.
Thank you, Katie. I think we've got time for one last question, so I will turn it over to Allison.
Right, this is in the realm of should you become elected or re-elected, as the case may be. If VMA is to publish a state of the village report a year from now, what concrete accomplishments would it include? Joel, you're first.
Okay, I really like this question. I think we need to institute a getting things done accountability culture. Something like this would do it, right? Andrew and Katie are amazing public servants, and but I'm going to hold them to the task, right? They're highlighting some of the same priorities now as they were 2 years ago, and there's a reason for that. And you've been making progress on that reason. But if we had a state of the village report with clearly stated priorities, we as a community would know what those priorities are. And when we're deviating from those priorities, we would be able to refocus, right? So as other fires are coming up, we would be able to refocus. So here's what I would do. A year from now, we should have broken ground on sidewalk repair on Brookville and other projects currently in the budget. Before the end of the year, we should be coming back to residents to decide between detailed options with full costs, risks, benefits. By the end of the year, we should be breaking ground with detailed plans from engineers on flooding and other walkability improvements, if that's what the residents choose. They may choose something else. By the end of the year too, most of these improvements should be completed. And we should have a revised code, ideally, especially a building code, that not just matches to market, but is truly cutting edge in protecting residents while not being onerous.
Thanks, Joel. Katie?
I'm so glad someone asked this. I can't contain my excitement. Yes, if reelected, I have a bunch of new ideas. Okay. First of all, our communications. We need a better communication plan. It should be the basis, the building block upon which we do everything in the council. And currently we've had some internal communications and external communication issues. And as a result, I really want to push for some better initiatives. I've worked with the village manager to try and improve the village newsletter, have some more opportunities for resident reporting, answer residents' questions. I'd like to start at Ask the Council Corner. I'd like to have an opportunity for more forums. I'd like to have a code corner where we come in and explain our code. It's 101 pages long, if anyone wants to know. I've read it. And I think we are missing key opportunities to explain ourselves to you a little bit better. And that is what I'm working on first and foremost. I want to improve the newsletter. I want to improve the website. I want to improve our communications plans, because that's what's most important to me. We serve you, and that's what I'm all about. I want to improve our resident relations, getting you answers to your emails, our community communications, and our public safety. It's all for you.
Thank you, Katie. Andrew?
So a great question and an issue many of us have run on initially. I think there are two components to how successful this council will be, and we will be held accountable to it. And that is, again, public safety and the infrastructure issues that we've discussed now throughout this forum. And as a VIP customer of ServPro, I get all of it. And I hate to think that the wheels of local government turn slowly, but we are confined within our code. And Joel and I have had these conversations. Let's look at the code. Let's figure out how we can fix some of these things that have been part of this municipality since its incorporation. I feel very strongly that we have the funds and we must proceed, whether it's within VMA jurisdiction, or as we've discussed, Brookville, which is a state highway. We can do this, and we will improve on these infrastructure projects, and we're working on it diligently. So it's something that it's frustrating to me. I came in 22 months ago wanting to fix a lot of things. I had to basically overrule some of the walkability task force recommendations to get a speed hump on Thornapple before the other streets, because there were repeat offenders shooting through that stop sign where I almost got hit by a car. So we can act a little more aggressively in these instances, and I'm committed to doing so.
Thank you.
Okay. So that concludes the question portion of the forum. Thank you to everyone who has submitted a question. We appreciate it. It's what makes this forum possible. So thank you to everyone for that. So we will conclude tonight with closing statements by the candidates. They're going to be 1 minute long. Up first, Andrew.
Thank you, and thanks again for the election committee's hard work. I thought this was a great opportunity for residents to hear from all candidates, and I'm encouraged by the important issues raised and the responses I heard this evening. As the son of refugees, I wanted to give back to a country that gave refuge to my father and his family fleeing Nazi Europe. My late father and uncle gave back by serving in the Korean War and World War II, respectively. And while I was never in harm's way like they were, I was fortunate enough to serve in the Clinton administration and on Capitol Hill. But all along, I knew that I wanted to serve in local government, to give back to my community, to help my neighbors, and to serve and help preserve what is so special about Martin's Additions. During my brief tenure, I hope I've made a small difference in how our council operates and how our residents are valued. Whether I'm reelected or not, I will continue to be part of the process of improving all of our lives, and I look forward to working with all of you in that capacity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Joel?
Thank you. Thanks again for joining tonight, and thank you, Andrew and Katie. Thank you to the many of you who have opened up your homes, scheduled a one-on-one with me, and generally welcome me, although I'm a newcomer to the VMA process, or maybe for some of you perhaps because I am a newcomer. We're at a crossroads. When it comes to our local politics, we need to decide if we're going to have an inclusive culture that gets things done, or if we're going to spend the next few years continuing to fight each other in the village. We need to decide if we're going to keep moving from fire to fire, or if we're going to become a community that is an exemplar of tackling climate change challenges, safety, and community engagement. We need to decide if we're going to be big government, slow, unable to move, or if we're going to be lean, efficient, and focus on the things that move the needle. Katie and Andrew are determined public servants who've been trying to move us past this moment. But at the end of the day, this election is a referendum on the general status quo that has faced this council more broadly. It is an opportunity for all of us, especially those who feel alienated, to re-engage. I hope that we're able to choose a brighter future instead of an inert, challenging past. I, for one, am very optimistic because as I've walked our streets, almost all of you have shared similar hopes and concerns. Thank you. And thanks, Elections Committee.
Thank you, Joel. Katie?
Well, there is a symbolic reason why I am wearing my white suit tonight. It's to honor the suffragettes, the 19th Amendment they fought for, and to symbolize that I am only the 19th woman to serve on the VMA Council since the first VMA Council was incorporated in 1985, represented then by Paul Weller, Mike Zielinski, Ed Holland, Lucy Foa, and Karen McManus. I will add that only 4 out of 19 female council members have ever been VMA chair. I have identified better ways to serve as your representative, and I will continue to roll up my sleeves behind the scenes to help deliver the resurgence of popular community events. I will continue to get answers to your questions, and I will be on the scene helping address concerns about public safety and building issues and voting for progress to move the initiatives we're already working on to the next level. I have only ever sought to be part of the solution and not the problem. I lean in. So please don't count me out. Vote for me to help move and lead this community forward as we approach the milestone of 40 years as a municipality together. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Katie. On behalf of the election committee, that concludes the 2023 VMA candidate forum. Again, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much, Andrew, Joel, Katie, for everything that you for your willingness to participate tonight. Thank you to all of the village residents for submitting questions, for attending, and for being so engaged in this process throughout this year. The big deadlines that we have coming up, or that are not deadlines, pursuant to the village election plan, ballots will be going out in the next few days. We will send an email notification to everyone when they are in the mail, so you can start looking for them. If a ballot does not show up fairly soon, if a ballot shows up and there is an issue, please reach out to the committee, reach out to Michael, and we will get that corrected. If you have anyone in your home who you are concerned they may not be on the voter roll, someone who has recently moved in, recently turned 18, anything, please reach out to us. The deadline for being added to the voter roll is May 18th. So please reach out on that front. As was mentioned earlier, May 10th, between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., right outside the village office, we will have a ballot drop-off event. Those of you who took advantage last year, it will be very similar for us. We will have a large secure drop box from the election vendor. You can bring down completed ballots that are in their signed envelopes. You do need the signed envelope to come with it if you're going to put it in the drop box. So please take advantage of that. Hopefully we will see some of you there, and keeping our fingers crossed for weather like what we had last year for the ballot drop event. But ballots are due back to the election vendor by 5 p.m. on May 23rd. As your ballots come in, that is the relevant deadline. Please keep that one in mind. And if there are any issues with your ballot, you need to request a replacement, please reach out to all of us. So again, thank you everyone for participating, and that concludes tonight's candidate forum.